So, I don't know about you guys, but I've been having a lot of fun with Red Dead 2. So, we've been doing 5M development, and what's pretty cool is that the Citizen FX Collective has actually started to release some of the binaries and software that we'll need to do RedM, which is basically 5M but for Red Dead 2. So, that's what I want to take a look at today. It's really exciting. It'll kind of show us some of the cool stuff that we can expect. Obviously we've got trainers like you see I'm using here, but it'd be really cool to do this all on a multiplayer server. So I don't know, that's enough talking. Let's just go ahead and install RedM so we can kind of get started, because this might be a long one. So the first thing that you're going to need to do is actually go into the 5M Citizen FX Discord. Once you're in there, you're going to scroll down and you'll see the RedM group of channels down at the bottom. In there is going to be the Hello channel. That's where you're going to see all this information that you're seeing on your screen now. And this has all the information and the download links that you'll need. So you're going to want to grab this SP build link here, and you're going to want to download that. It's going to be a zip file. Within that zip file is going to be 2 files. You're going to extract that into its own folder wherever you want RedM installed, because it's going to download a whole bunch of other files into that directory. So you don't want to just like put it on your desktop or something like that. So once you have it extracted, you're going to want to go ahead and run it. Once it's running, it's going to go ahead and update itself and download all the missing files. Once it has all the missing files, it's going to launch again, and it's going to start to download the cache that it's missing. So RedM needs a specific cache version, so it will obtain it from somebody else who has one. And then once you have the cache version, it'll go ahead and relaunch, and you'll see this kind of pink screen. If you run into any issues with this, like for example you see here, I'm kind of stuck on 25%, you can close RedM and close the launcher, relaunch both of them, and try it again. And I've run into some issues where you have to try it and launch it 2 or 3 times for it to work. Like I said earlier, this is early access software. This is kind of what we get for, kind of being on the bleeding edge, but it's some really cool stuff, and I'm really excited to write some of the really cool scripts that we can do, because it's, Wild West. And, I don't know, I'm pretty excited about it. Alright, so once you have the RedM single player installed and you have the cache downloaded, we'll need to move on to the next step. So we'll be downloading the multiplayer server, but we're using it and we're going to install it, but we're mainly just using it to load the resource into RedM. The multiplayer in RedM is still very, very buggy. Like if you die, you're just dead forever. The horses don't spawn with carriages. Some people are invisible. It's kind of weird. So we'll be using this to load the resource, but we actually won't be loading like Session Manager or anything like that, which will actually need to like have the actual multiplayer work. So we'll go ahead and download the latest build here. If you run into any issues with that, you can always download the next latest. The other thing we'll need is the Cfx Server Data. So I'll have this link down below as well. And this is actually the same server data that we use in 5M, except we'll have to make a few changes to this. So I've already copied over my RedM SP files onto this virtual machine. You'll see them here. And this has all of the everything except the cache. You don't need the cache to do any development. So I don't want to put it into here. Let's go ahead and make a new folder called RedM Server. Once this is open, we can go ahead and actually extract these zip files. Open those up. And then in here, we'll want to just extract the resources folder into here. And then in here, you can just copy and drag all these files into here. And you can extract it into this folder. So once this is set up, there's a few edits we'll have to make to the chat system to make them work, because RDR2 is using a new version of the Citizen FX API or library, whatever you want to call it. So we'll need to make some edits to this. So once you go to RedM Server, if you go to Resources, go to System, go to Chat, and then there's the __ resource.lua. So this is one of the main things that changed, is this needs to be fxmanifest.lua. And in here, actually, did I type that wrong? fx manifest. I think I typed fx mainfest. And we'll go ahead and open this up with code. And in here, we'll have to make a few edits at the top. So let's go ahead and add games, and then RDR3. I know that seems kind of weird. You'd think it would be RDR2. But I presume, that's more of like the next gen consoles is RDR2. FX version is going to be Adamant, ADAMANT. And then we're going to need something else for this, but we'll copy and paste it from the console once we get to. I know that sounds kind of weird. The other thing we'll need to do is edit this the chat system. So we'll open this up in our text editor as well. And in here, we want to do for a search for is control pressed. And we're going to need to edit this value because these values are actually different for RDR3 or 2, I guess. Now it's confusing me. So we'll need to set this to 0x9720FCEE. I'll just have that down below that you can copy and paste yourself as well. But this is the key for the T key. As weird as that is. I had to look this up and the actual like RedM Discord to figure this out. So we'll go ahead and save that, and you can close it, but we'll leave this one open because we'll have to make one more edit to this. Alright, so now that we've got all of that done, we need to go ahead and create our server config. So let's create a new text document, server.cfg. And then let's go ahead and open this up in our text editor. And then let's paste in the default config. Alright, so there we go. So we'll need to change this to ENUS. There's nothing really up here that we need to change yet. Later we'll need to actually add our extension here that we write. Here you can set your name if you'd like to. But the main important thing is down here you need to set your license key and your Steam Web API key. Mainly the license key is the most important thing right now. But you'll need to go ahead and fill this out. And once you have this filled out, you can go ahead and save it. Alright, so I've got my server.cfg file created. So we can go ahead and run the server. So much like 5M, we'll do run.cmd plus exec server.cfg. But there's an extra option that we actually have to add for RedD, and that's so that the FX server knows what game it's launching. So to do that, we need to just type plus set game name RDR3. And then you can hit enter, and it'll load everything. And the most important thing that we're looking out for here is the actual error that it's going to throw us. So we'll click allow access, and then we want to actually control C out, because if you notice this error right here, this error right here is that resource chat does not contain the RedM pre-release warning in fxmanifest.lua. Please add RDR warning. I acknowledge that this is a pre-release build of RedM, and I am aware that my resources will become incompatible once RedM ships. So yeah, we need to go add this to there, and we can just paste that in. And then we can go ahead and start the server again. We shouldn't see any kind of issues. We will see an error for Session Manager RDR3. We're not loading that because we don't want the network code to actually run. We just want to stay in single player for this. So there we go. Our server's all ready to go. So let's go ahead and jump into Visual Studio. Alright, so we're here in Visual Studio, so we can go ahead and create a new project for this. We'll make a class library .NET Framework C# like last time for 5M. And then we're going to want to set the project name. We'll just name it Client. And then the solution name, we can name whatever you'd like, but I'll name mine RDR Test. And then you want to make sure the framework is .NET Framework 4.5.2. And then we can go ahead and create the solution. Alright, so once we're in Visual Studio, we can do much of the same stuff that we have to do for 5M. You can go ahead and rename this from class 1 to whatever you'd like, but I'll name mine main. And then we'll go ahead and say yes to the mass rename. And then in here we can go ahead and create our public main. Public main. And then we can start doing whatever we'd like registering a tick handler, registering commands. But one thing we need to actually do is add the reference. So we'll right click on references, add reference. Then I'll browse. And you're going to go to wherever you have RedM SP installed. So for me, that's C, RedM SP, Citizen, CLR2, lib, mono 4.5, and then we're going to copy the citizenfx.core.dll. Copy this, and then we need to go to wherever our repos are, so RDR test, client, and then you can just paste this in here. And we'll go ahead and click add, and OK. And in here, we'll come down here to copy local, and we'll set this to false. Then the next thing we'll want to do is create our actual like fx manifest.lua. So we'll come up here, client, and then we'll actually add the file first because it's a lot cleaner way in my opinion. So we'll go to C, and then we'll go to our actual like repos folder. So for me that's C, users, admin, source, repos, RDR test, and in here I'm going to create a new file called fx manifest.lua. I'm going to go ahead and save this. Open that up in my text editor. And in here we're going to set the same stuff. So we'll set games to RDR2, and then you can even set GTA 5, but honestly that's not needed. And then fx_version, ADA MANT. And then I'm going to copy and paste the warning from the client script that we saw. So I have this pasted in here. And then the next thing we need to do is set client script to, whoops, not capitalized though, client script to client.net.dll, and go ahead and save this. And this looks good. So we've got our game set, we've got our FX version, we've got our warning, and we've got our client script. So we can go ahead and close that, and then we'll go back to Visual Studio and we'll do client, add existing item, and then we'll go up one folder, show all files, and then we'll select our fx manifest.lua. Let's go ahead and click this file, and we'll click to copy to output, and we'll do copy always. So this way our actual like fx manifest is always saved for us and copied, all that good stuff. So within here, now that we have our references added, we can go ahead and add our inheritance for base script. Hover over that, and then we can actually add the citizenfx.core. Just close that out. So in here, like I said, we can do our tick handlers, we can do commands, stuff like that. So the easy stuff, of course, is to just register a command. And we'll need to import this, obviously. So this register command is actually exactly the same. So you just give it a command name. So we'll say, let's say give horse, and then we'll register a new action of test horse, and false is the last parameter. So let's go ahead and create this test horse function. So this will be a private void of test horse. So in here we'll need to do some things. Now there's quite a few things that are different in this new version of the CitizenFX. So for example, since this is so early in development, a lot of the natives haven't been translated yet. So things are still pretty early on, so some of this stuff is a little more difficult than it would normally be. But anyways, so the first thing we need to do is actually know who our player is. So unfortunately, you can't just, do ped player or anything like that. We have to get it through the API. So we'll call him player ped ID, and we'll make this equal to API.player ped ID, like that. And this is going to return an int, and this is going to be our handle. As you can kind of remember from 5M, we have the dot handle. So once we have our actual pedestrian, we can start to do some different stuff. So the first thing we need to do is know where we want to spawn him. So we probably just want to spawn him like a few steps ahead of us, for example. So much like 5M, we have forward vector. We have the forward vector, which kind of can help us out here. But to use forward vector, we actually need to know where the player's at first. So we need to get his position. So we'll use a type of vector3, and we'll name this POS for position. And then this is going to be equal to function.call. And this is how you can call some different natives. And what we'll need to do is add the open bracket, and this is so that we can tell it what it's actually going to be returning. Because if you don't add this and you do the regular function, it's just going to return a void, which isn't going to work for you very well. So in here, we'll just tell it that it's going to be returning a vector3, and then we can call hash. And then in here, you can see a lot of the functions. Some of these will look pretty familiar. Some of these might be new, but the one that we're looking for specifically is get entity chords. And then the next thing you need to pass it is the actual arguments. So this can be an infinite list of arguments. It depends on the native that you're calling, but this one just needs our player ped ID. So we'll go ahead and call that. So this will actually call this native, get our entity coordinates, and store them into POS. But this is just going to get our current position. We actually probably want to go a few steps ahead of our guy. So we can do a few things. We can make another vector3 of forward POS, and we can make this equal to a function dot call a vector3, and then hash dot get, and then there's entity forward vector. And just like the one above, we just need to pass this our actual ped ID, and this will then return that. So this is just going to return the forward vector, so we actually have to add this onto our position, and then we probably want to multiply the forward vector a little bit, because if you just leave it as is now, it's not going to be very far away from you. So if you're spawning like a big coach or something, you might end up between them, and the game will kind of bug out if you're stuck between the horses. So what we'll do is we'll call POS for our position, and then we'll call plus equal. And what this is basically doing is doing POS equals POS plus whatever you type here. It's kind of the way to look at it. So we'll do POS plus enter, or plus equal, not enter. And we want to call our forward POS, and then we'll times this by 5, which should put it about 5 steps ahead of us, ahead of the player. The next thing we want to know is which way the player is actually facing, because if you spawn like a coach, for example, the opposite way that you're facing, you can end up inside the horses as well. So it's important to know what the actual heading is. So this is a float, and we'll call this HDG for heading, and we'll do another function dot call, and this is going to return a float. And then you can probably guess what this one's called, get entity heading, and we'll call our player ped ID here and end that off there. So now we've kind of got everything that we need. We know where we want to spawn in, which way we want to spawn in, and we know where our player, like who our player is and stuff like that. So we can go ahead and actually create the horse or the carriage or whatever you want to call them. So technically this is like a vehicle. So we'll call int of VEH for vehicle, and this will be equal to function.call, and this is going to return an integer, and then create vehicle. And now this one has all kinds of very unique parameters. So let's go ahead and take a look at this one. Now this is another thing that's temporary. He even says it up here, temporary, that it is not going to be here forever. So when this link gets updated, I'll try to update the video. If it's not right, I can try to just let me know, and I can try to help you out there. All right, so as you can see here, we get our 2 different ones. There's not too many options here to kind of help you out and let you know what is what, but this is kind of where some research will come in handy, either scoping through the RedM chats or scoping through GitHub, something like that will kind of help you figure these out. So let's go back to Visual Studio, and so the first thing that it needs is the hash of the vehicle that we want to create. So for now, let's just pass hash. We haven't actually created this variable yet. Then it needs to know the position, so we'll call pos.x, pos.y, pos.z, and then we need our heading here, and then we'll pass 0, 0, 0 for these parameters, false, false, 0, 0. And I know you kind of have to trust me, it works. I did some research on GitHub and found some other people spawning vehicles, and I kind of did my own research. Some people were putting the heading way down here, and the heading's definitely right here. So I've even kind of already improved on some of the code we found. So anyways, the next thing we need to do is create this hash. So the hashing system is completely different in this new one. So we can't just call api.get hash, get hash key. I wish it was that easy. We're going to need to write a function for this. So let's go ahead and let's create a new class. And we'll name this one just util. And then in here, we're going to actually create this function. So this is actually coming from the RedM simple trainer. So they've actually kind of already figured out how the hashing works exactly. So I'm going to copy and paste this function over. And there we go. So this is going to generate the hash that the CitizenFX code needs so that it can spawn everything. Let's go ahead and save that. All right, so let's go ahead and add in the function that we need. So it's going to obviously return an int, and we'll call this hash to match up with the variable that we already created. And we'll need, we'll need to do gen hash. And then this needs to be equal to the string of the vehicle that you want to create. So for example, coach 2 is a decent vehicle to spawn. And this has given us some trouble here. So let's go ahead and using static client util up there. And that'll resolve that issue. So now we have that, but the next thing we need to do is actually load the vehicle. So the loading system is basically the same as 5M. So we'll actually need to, I guess, create the function before we start writing the code for it. All right, so we'll go ahead and add some lines up here. And let's do a public static async task bool of load model. And then we're going to need the int of hash and do it like so. So we still kind of stuck to doing everything with natives, unfortunately. So if function, we're going to need to probably import this, yeah. And using that, and then we'll do .call, and this is going to return a bool because we're going to check to make sure this is actually valid. So is model valid, and then we'll pass our hash, and then we can do this. So anyways, we'll then know, we can name it here. So model hash is not valid. So this way we can actually prevent ourselves from getting stuck in some different stuff. So let's go ahead and using system diagnostics. And in here we'll want to call the actual loading function. So we'll do function.call. And we don't have to put a type here or anything because we don't really care about the response from this. It's going to be true because we know it's a valid model. We already checked it. So we'll call hash.request model. And then we'll pass our hash again. And then while, man, I cannot type today. Function.call hash. And then we want to check if it has loaded. So has model loaded. And we'll pass our hash again. And then in here we can write our debug line. And then let's go add our $sign so we can use that variable in there. And then we will await pastscript.delay 100. And let's see. Oh, this has to return a bool, sorry. Because of course it's going to just return a void if you don't have this type here. So that's what it was complaining about. You can't convert a bool to a void. It just doesn't work. So we probably just have to add this too. There we go. So this is all good. So let's go ahead and use this function. And so let's see. We'll do an await load model hash. And I actually have this too far up, actually, because we haven't even determined what our hash is yet. And we'll just do a return here. So we'll go ahead and await this. So we need to go add our async operator here and fix that up. So this way it'll go ahead and load the model, and then if it returns false, it'll just return. So that way, if you fat finger something up here, you don't have to manually restart any resources or anything like that. So now we actually have our vehicle created. We're kind of almost there. So there is one other thing that you can do. You can always set it as a mission entity. Doesn't really matter for us, but if you wanted to do it, you can just do function.call and then hash. You can probably guess what this thing's called. So set entity as mission entity, and this will basically prevent it from despawning. And then we'll call true. All right. And whoops, I did not mean to do that. I have a very bad habit of doing that. I've been doing that pretty much almost every function. So anyways, there we go. So we can set it as a mission entity, and this will actually spawn our horse. So there's a few other things you can do. You can always do it through the function like this, but if you wanted to do it through like a tick handler, you can do on tick like this. And it's pretty similar to how we do ticks for 5M, except you have to add this decorator here. And then we'll add him here. So in here you can do different kinds of like loops if you wanted to do, or if we wanted to, for example, detect if a key was pressed. So if API.is control just pressed, API player ped ID, and so this is basically checking, has our player ped ID pressed a button. So as for this button, there's all different kinds of ones there are, but this I'll have a link to them down below in the description. But this one here is the horse call action. So that way, whenever we actually want to say press H and call our horse, it will just spawn us one, because technically we're not going to have one. So we'll just call test horse here. And there we go. That's all we really have to add for that. And now our horses should spawn perfectly. So let's go ahead and save this and test this out real quick. So we've got everything in here. We don't have any errors. So let's go ahead and set our properties for this. The most important thing is we'll need to change this to client.net. And then let's go to build. And then I always like to set this out of directory and into a single output directory. Whoops, I did not mean to click browse. That's just so whenever you actually eventually add a server library, you don't have to worry about going to do two different locations to grab them. So let's go ahead and save this here. And let's go ahead and build, see if we got any issues. It's probably just going to complain about this being async and not having anything async in it, but it's just something that's required for that. So, oh, it's actually giving us some complaints about this. That's interesting. So, you can't always just name these back to that, but honestly, you probably just have to get rid of that. And it should work fine. So we'll save that and build. There we go. So everything built right. So now the next step is for us to actually add this to our server. So let's go to output. This is in our repos folder. Let's go ahead and copy these guys. Let's open up a new Explorer window. And we'll go to C, the RedM server, resources, and let's create a new folder in here called RDR test. And I'm going to paste the files in there. I'm going to come back to our server because we actually have to add this to our config for it to work. Open this back up in code. And then let's scroll up to the top, away from all my key values, and let's do start RDR test here. There we go. All right, so let's go ahead and give this a shot and let's see how it goes. All right, so I'm loaded into RedM, and what I'm going to go ahead and do is connect to the virtual machine. So you can go to direct connect, and if you're running it locally, you can obviously just hit your loopback address at 127.0.0.1, and this would get a locally hosted server. Mine's not there. Mine's hosted at this IP, and then I'm going to go ahead and connect here. Now, if you run into any kind of loading issues, you can always try to reload. I've had like maybe 1 or 2 crashes while loading, like into the game. So no worries if you run into that too. Just reload and try it again. All right, so I've loaded into game. So let's go ahead and give it a shot. Press T, and we'll do our command. Give horse, and boom, spawned our carriage. It looks pretty good. We can also go ahead and press H and spawn one that way, and that kind of works as intended. Pretty cool. So let's go ahead and move on to the next thing we'll do. Alright, so we're back here into Visual Studio, and it's time to move on to the next thing. So there's a few other things that we can do that already work and that I've kind of tested out, like giving weapons. You can even do some scenarios and stuff like that. So let's go ahead, let's do the scenarios because that one's pretty easy. So we'll do API.register command, and we'll do one that is, let's say, start. Oops. I'm completely on the wrong home key there. There we go. Start scenario, new action, and then let's do test start scenario, and we'll do false as the last one. And then we're also going to want to be able to stop it. So we'll do register command, stop scenario, new action, test, stop scenario, false there. And you could always maybe register like a tick event, and while they are, while there's a flag set that they are in a scenario, as soon as they would maybe press WASD, you could also put this function into there too. But I'm actually not sure what the movement keys are, so that's part of the reason why we're not doing that. So we'll do a private void of test start scenario. And in here we can actually do our native call. So we'll do function.call hash, and then there is a start scenario in place. And we're going to want this one. So there we go. And you can always do also like at position if you want, but this one's just as good. It'll just do it exactly where you're at. The first parameter this one wants is your player ped, so we'll do API. And then you need to do player ped ID. And then the next parameter it wants is the actual scenario that you want to do. So we'll do API get hash key. And then there's all different kinds of scenarios. There's like so many more than GTA 5. There's a huge list here at the Mod Red Dead website. It's all different kinds of ones, and there's quite a few. Like the smoking ones, the drinking ones. There's just basically probably basically any type that you'd ever want. This list is super massive, but I guess with as open world as RDR is, you kind of have to. So let's do this one here, World Human Smoke, and let's go back to Visual Studio and let's pop this in here. Then the next parameter it wants is the time that it's going to be doing it. So if we set this to -1, it'll just do it infinite. And let's pass true, false, false, false for these parameters. And that'll get us set to where we exactly need it at. And there we go. So the next thing we'll need is private void test stop scenario. And this one, as you probably can guess, we'll do a function.call to hash dot clear ped task, and you can do ped task or ped task immediately. If you do immediately, it's kind of too quick, and he like goes into a quick T-pose as he ends the scenario. So I found that one doesn't work too well. And then we'll just do clear ped task, and then once again we're going to need our player ped ID, and then we'll go ahead and end that there. So this will get our scenario going. Then the other thing I mentioned is maybe like a weapon thing. So we'll basically want to give our guys some weapons because you spawn with nothing. You don't have anything when you first spawn into RedM. So let's go ahead and create that function. So we'll name it test weapon, and then we can go ahead and add our function up here. Let's do API.register command and give weapon. And we'll do a new action of the test weapon, and then false for that guy. Let's come back down here, and we'll probably want to give him a few different weapons. So we'll want to maybe give him like a repeater, maybe like a lasso or something like that. So what we'll want to do is do a function.call, and then now this one there isn't like a predetermined one that's already translated in here. Like if you do weapon, like give weapon, there's not really too much give delayed weapon. So I mean, I don't know, that one's not too far away, but there are some actual give weapon natives that you can do. So you can do give weapon to ped, and then there's also this one, and this one has a lot more options, and it actually looks like people are using this one. So for a list of weapon groups, here's a weapons enum made by Mushi. So let's take a look at this. And this will have a list of like weapons, weapon groups, stuff like that. So this is all pretty useful. So let's go ahead and copy this into our utility class down here. And we'll copy this. Let's go back to Visual Studio. And then we'll go to our utility class down here. And we'll add these guys down at the bottom. And this will even give us like ammo and stuff like that. So that's pretty interesting. Alright, so now that we've got that, we can go ahead and save the utility one. And we'll want to go back to our native documentation. So he gives a few of the parameters here that you should actually fill out. And the rest of them are pretty self-explanatory, like ammo count, equip now, stuff like that. So yeah, pretty cool. So let's go back to Visual Studio. And since there's no hash for that, we actually have to call it by the native variable. So for example, this right here, we'll actually copy and paste this, because this is the only way we can actually copy it. And we're going to cast this to a hash, and this will get us doing exactly what we need. So the first parameter that it said it actually needed was the ped. So we'll go ahead, since we know we're going to be giving our guy a few weapons, let's go ahead and create a variable for this. So player ped ID equals API player ped ID. And let's go ahead and add him in here. Then the next thing we're going to need is the actual is a uint of the weapon. So that would be something like weapon hash, and then there's all the weapons we added. So let's just give him like a repeater. Whoops. Repeater carbine. And then the next thing is the ammo count. So we'll do 100, and then we'll pass true and true for these two variables. Then 1 for the weapon group, false, 0.5, 1.05, and or 1.0f, sorry. And these are the two parameters that he mentioned. And then the last two were 0 and 0, so false and 0 for that. And go ahead and end that call there. So this will actually give our guy a repeater. Now we could just copy and paste this a few times and change these weapons, but it's probably better and cleaner for if we just created a give weapon to ped function. So we'll take a ped and we'll take a weapon hash of weapon, and what we want to do instead is move this call, let's say, into here, and then we'll change this to just weapon. We'll change this to ped, and then up here all we have to do is call give weapon to ped player ped ID, and then we need to pass a weapon hash, so we'll pass the repeater. And that is much easier to type out. So obviously this would be like a really good utility. Utility. I cannot type today at all. To ped player ped ID, and what else do we have? Like there's like the binoculars that you can give him. What else did I say? Like a lasso, we'll give him player ped ID weapon hash dot lasso. So this way he'll actually get all these weapons and we can use them. And the ammo won't really apply to some of these, but it's fine. It won't really cause like any major issues with anything. It'll still work just fine. All right, so we've got everything. We've got our functions up here. We've got our scenarios created, so we can actually go ahead and test this out. We won't add any other controls just because it's pretty early on, and like a lot of this probably isn't going to stay the same. So, all right, let's go ahead and do a quick build. Let's make sure everything works. Make sure we didn't make any terrible mistakes, but it looks like we're all good. So let's go ahead and copy over this file. Go to resources, RDS, RDR test, copy these over and replace these. And then if you have the server already running, you can always just do restart RDR test, and it'll start and restart the resource. Or you can just Control C and restart the server if you'd like that way. But let's go ahead and jump back into RedM and let's see kind of what we did. All right, so we're back in game. Let's go ahead and try out our scenarios, for example. So let's start scenario. And if you take a look, he's actually got a little cigarette in his hand. And he'll stand here and do his thing. But you can't really move out of it or anything like that. So if we do /stop scenario, you'll see him kind of slowly drop the cigarette, and then you can walk away or whatever you want. If you did the immediately thing, he would just drop it and like glitch immediately back to like his resting position. So that's why I don't do the immediately one. Let's test out our other one, give weapon. And we can instantly see that worked. It gave us our lasso and stuff. So let's go ahead and come out to here. So we probably have to wait for this thing to realize that we're not on a server. So let's just give it a few seconds until it, yep, there it goes, until it realizes it can't connect. And then we should be able to do whatever we want with this. So all good. And now we got our weapons. And these signs are even destructible. I did not know that for the longest time. So yeah, it looks like we got everything working. There's even pedestrians out. Let's see what he's not too happy about that. But anyways, we got our weapon, we got our lasso, we got our binoculars so we can see him run away. He's hurting. But yeah, that's going to be all for today. I'm sure this is a long video as is, but hopefully you guys have enjoyed making your own RedM mods. We're going to do some cool stuff in this series. I think the 5M stuff's pretty cool, but I already have some pretty cool ideas for stuff that we can do. Like especially once this gets improved and like, you know, stuff like that is fixed. I promise this isn't my PC. That seems to be like a RedM thing. Like, yeah, like this bush flickers too. And stuff like that. Yeah, there it goes. But yeah, hopefully you guys have enjoyed. Leave your suggestions for mods and scripts that we can create in this series. I think that'd be pretty cool. And I'll see you guys next time.